Welcome to the Digital Egghead lesson on menus. In this lesson, we're going to talk about all the various menu items and some of the options that are found within them. Now, there are an immense amount of options found within the Photoshop menu, so we can't cover them all in detail. Some of them warrant having their own lessons as a whole to really cover what those particular options can do. But we'll at least acknowledge and touch on each one of the options in each one of the menu items. The first menu item that we come to is File. Under File, you'll find some of the most basic items that you find under any program or anything that you work with. Things such as New, which will start a new document where you could specify a lot of the different things ahead of time, which you want the document to be called, the size, and various other things. Then there is Open, which is going to open a pre-existing document or image that you want to start working on. Then we have Browse and Bridge. Bridge is Adobe's digital asset management app. It's kind of a way to manage all your files across all of your Adobe applications or programs. It allows you to really just kind of manage and sort and organize everything in one location within Adobe's ecosystem. Then we have Open As, and Open As just allows you to open Photoshop documents as different types of things, like Smart Object, which has its own menu item. You can open up a Photoshop document as a Smart Object specifically. Then we have Open Recent. Open Recent just keeps a list of documents that you've been working on recently. It's quick access to those. Then we have Close Document, which we'll just close the active document that you're working on. You can also click on the X here. If you have multiple windows open, like we talked about in the last lesson, you can close all, and that'll close everything that's open. You can close what you're working on and go to Bridge if you are ready to move to another program such as Lightroom. You can save your document, just standard Photoshop. You could save as, which will save it as various different formats. You can revert, and what revert does is, rather than going back through all of the history and stepping back one item at a time, it will revert it back to the last point that the document was saved. You've got export. Export gives you a variety of options of what you want to export your document as. You've got generate. Generate has one thing here, and it's called Generate Image Assets. This is a really great and really powerful tool, and I think this one really deserves its own lesson, and I'll talk about that a little more in detail at another time. But the basics of it is that you can set up your layers, like I have this one as divider.gif, and I have a logo.jpg, and simply by adding file extensions, Photoshop will automatically generate those layers as files. So I have this logo, which you can see goes right here, and it's its own layer, and if I have it generate the asset, it'll save this logo as logo.jpg in its own in a folder of generated assets. It's a really neat tool. Then we have Share on Behance, which is Adobe's social sharing platform. Same thing as you see down here in the lower left of your document. It's a way for you to share with the Adobe community the work that you do. Search Adobe Stock. This is relatively new for Adobe, and this is included in more than Photoshop. It's Illustrator and other image editing software that Adobe provides, but it's their own stock image site. You can and it's just like any other stock image site. You pay for the images, you can do subscriptions. It has the added convenience of being located right here within Photoshop or Illustrator or anything else. If you click this link, it'll take you to the website, but there are spots in Photoshop's interface where it kind of integrates, making it a little more streamlined. Place embedded and place linked are two different ways to work with smart objects, and you can place embedded smart objects within your file, or you can link to other files. And I guess it doesn't have to be smart objects, but it's just a way to place other things that you're working on within the file that you're currently working on. If you place a linked file, then you have a separate file that you can work on, and any changes that are made in that file, which is called the source file, will be represented in this new document that you're working on that links to it. The advantage of that is that you can keep your assets separate, but you do have to edit them within their own source files rather than being able to do it directly within here. So it's kind of a give and take. It just depends on what works best for you at the time. You've got Automate, and Automate is a whole. It's another one of those things that really needs its own lesson. There are a lot of different things that you can automate. Between Automate and scripts, actually, these are ways to speed up processes which you would do regularly or routinely, and make it so that you can do it a lot quicker rather than going through several steps. You can automate things into 1 or 2 steps and make it happen a lot quicker. Importing, there's only a few different things that Photoshop can import here. Video frames can be imported into their own layers. Notes and WIA support. File info, this is simply information about the file that you are currently working on. This particular file I have open doesn't really have a lot of stuff in it, so there's nothing populated here. But if you have a photograph that you've taken and it's got a bunch of metadata built into it or other data, it'll show all that stuff here. And then we have print and print one copy. Print will open the Photoshop print dialog and give you the options that you need to work with in order to print your image. And print one copy will just simply print it without opening the dialog and use settings that you've already got in place. And that's it. Exit's the last thing on there, but that's a high level overview of what's under the File menu. And next we have the Edit menu. There's a lot of stuff within the Edit menu. Just like the File menu, I'm only going to touch on a few things, or I'll touch on everything, but just lightly. Almost everything in the whole Photoshop menu layout has got either multiple ways to do it, shortcuts on ways to do it, or just really needs more in-depth explanation to make it make sense. Okay, so in the Edit menu, the first things we have are the basic undo, step forward, step backwards. What that is, undo is what everybody knows. You've done something, you undo it, and it's done. It goes backwards. Step forward and step backwards utilizes the history that the Photoshop palette has for you. So if you look over in the Histories palette, which I have open right now, I've got a few things over here, and you can see this is kind of the log of all things that I've done to this file recently. The last thing I did was a deselect. And if you do your edit, step backwards, you'll see that on there it just steps back by 1, step backwards again, edit, step forwards, goes forward. And that's all there is to that. The next section is, you've got a fade. The fade command applies to when you do Photoshop effects or filters, adjustments. You could do, so like if I grab the logo here and I do an adjustment, we'll just do a hue and saturation adjustment, and you can see clearly that has changed the color. The fade just allows you to kind of tone it down, the actual adjustment. So maybe I don't want it to be that drastic, so I bring that adjustment back just a little bit, and that way you can control the adjustment specifically. Now I'll go back and undo that. The next section is the cut, copy, paste section. This is standard word processing type of things. Cut will cut an element out and put it on the clipboard, and you can paste it in somewhere else. Let's do an example real quick. Go to the image, do a marquee. I apologize if I do a lot of shortcuts and you guys don't know what I'm doing. I'll try to do shortcuts only when it doesn't really make that much of a difference. In this case, I'm just doing the marquee, and I'm going to cut this out. So we'll do edit, cut, and now that's gone there. If we go to paste, it'll paste what I've got, what I just cut. Okay. And then we've got copy. If I wanted to do the same thing, I could do edit, copy, except not cutting it out. Now I can paste another one. So now I have two. I can undo that. Then we have copy merged. That's an interesting and useful tool. What copy merged will do for you is if you select a section of things, now if you just do copy, it's going to copy what you have, what layer you currently have selected. So right now I have that image layer selected, image 1. So if I go edit, copy, and then edit, paste, it's only going to paste that image because that's the layer I was on. If you do copy merged, it'll copy everything that's on those layers, basically merging them together. So now if I paste, I have a a merged version of what I just copied. Okay. Then you have a few special options for pasting. Paste in place is going to paste it exactly in the same place that you copied it from. So if we get rid of the marquee and we go edit, paste in place, you can see it's right on top of where it was. It's 1 pixel off here, but essentially right on top of where the other one is. So we'll throw that one away. Now with the other two options, a little bit interesting. So we have paste into. What paste into does, it'll paste into the selection area that you have. So we'll make an area here and paste into that, and it pastes it inside the selection area, and it creates a layer mask, which we'll talk about later too. But now there's a layer mask around this. So if we were to move that image outside of the area, you can see it'll disappear because it pastes it into this mask. And if we do the exact opposite, paste outside, it'll create the inverse of that map. So the image will actually be outside that box. So right now you can't see it because it's hidden behind it. But if we drag the image over, you can see it shows up now. So it's outside that selection. And there are a lot of different uses for that. And we can talk about those more maybe in another lesson, but it's a really cool and useful tool. Okay, so let's get back and undo all that. Okay, next item in here, we have check spelling, find and replace text. It's not something that you'll use a lot probably unless you're in a business where you've got to put a lot of copy into your Photoshop document and actually check it there. That doesn't usually happen though. If you're in a business, you've got other people who are checking your copy before you get it. But these are standard, word editing type of things. Fill and stroke. Fill will fill the area you've selected. So you select this and you fill it. It'll just fill it with whatever you've got selected. So I've selected a gray color. Okay, and there's that. Stroke, we'll put a stroke around the box. However thick you want the stroke to be, you select that, inside, center, outside. Check your options, and then there's a stroke. We'll get rid of that. Oh, you can't really see the stroke because I made it gray. But we'll do that again. Make a stroke around that box. 4 pixel stroke. There we go. And now you can see there's a 4 pixel stroke there. And That's all on the same image layer that I've got here. So you gotta be careful about that. If you're gonna make things like that, you want to make sure you're doing it on the layer that you want it to be on. So we'll go back and undo that. Now the next section, this is one of those sections that really needs to be delved into a lot deeper. But these are some really cool tools: content aware scale, puppet warp, perspective warp, and the free transform and transform are basic tools, but the first three are really powerful tools. So essentially what the content aware scale will do is it'll allow you to take an image and scale it without scaling the important elements of the image, such as buildings or people. So for instance, if we wanted to scale this image, we needed it to be just a little bit smaller. We didn't want to cut anything out of the image. We just wanted to shrink it in, but we don't want her to look weird or squished in. So we could use the content aware scale and keep her the same size while squishing in the bench and trees. The puppet warp is really amazing. The puppet warp allows you to essentially put a mesh around certain objects and change them and move them around in any way you want. Really hard to describe, but we'll try to do a lesson on that one another time. Perspective warp can change your point of view. Like if you're a photographer and you've taken a photograph from a specific perspective, but you realize that you really wanted it to be shifted maybe to the left a little bit, you can actually change your photograph so that it looks like you were standing 50 feet to the left, or higher or lower or whatever. It's really neat thing. Free transform and transform are the basic: scale, rotate, skew, distort. These are the things that just change and manipulate your image in the ways that you've seen since the beginning of time. Free transform is just no constraints. You can do whatever you want with it. Align and blend your layers. Define, so the definition section here, you can define brush presets that you like to use a lot. You can define a pattern. This is where if you were going to fill a pattern, we'll talk about that also another time. But if you're going to fill a pattern, you would want to define it first. For instance, these eggs down here, I set these as a pattern, and then I use the fill to fill it with my egg pattern. Let's see. And then define custom shape. Alright. And then the purge section is just clearing out any histories and caches. And here's a preset section for PDFs and other presets. Remote connections is a tool that you can use to connect to other devices or other services. As a basic thing, you could connect to presets you have set on your iPad or your tablet and have them connect here through the remote connections. And the next section is just settings, profile settings. This is all to do with colors, color profiles, and this is really more of like a photographer type of thing. This is a very complex section if you get into this type of stuff. And then you have your keyboard shortcuts, menus, toolbar, preferences, and those are kind of the basics of setting up things that you want to set up within this program. So keyboard shortcuts. I'm going to go through a section on doing this, but this is where you can assign specific shortcuts, even see which ones are already out there. And then the menus, it utilizes the same interface as keyboard shortcuts. Keyboard shortcuts and menus, they're both here within these tabs. This is all for assigning and defining. And the toolbar, you can do some customization on your tools here, which is these. And then we have preferences, and this is generally just all of the preferences that you would have for your workspace and working with Photoshop. All of these will take you to the same interface, and you can see all those same options right here, and scroll between them. Set your color themes. You can set there's a plethora of things in here that you can change to your liking. So that's worth exploring to figure out what it is you want all your preferences to be. Okay, and that's it for the edit section.